Hey, you've made it to the final lesson in Module 2. In the first lesson of this module, I introduced you to the 4 quadrants of life. In the second lesson, we talked about how life is always wanting to have rich conversations with you about these 4 quadrants. In this lesson, we're going to talk about what positive transformation looks like when you're willing to have these rich conversations. Let's get started.
Laura brought up such a great point of just like you are wanting, it's important to remember that this is an ever-evolving conversation. I'm missing my mouse thing. What I want to talk about next, and what we've started to talk about already, is really that we need to start seeing, or I shouldn't say we need to start seeing, but I think it's accurate to say that living a beautiful life is much more of an art than a science. It's much more of a conversation than a specific equation or tool or template or program. And as we're going to talk about now, it's much more of a process and a practice, a dynamic process and practice versus the stagnant state of being. And what I wanted to start this conversation talking about is the idea of states and traits. Are any of you familiar with that idea? A little bit? Little bit. Did we talk about it probably? Okay. So I cannot remember who to credit this idea to. So if that person is listening, please let me know. I'd be really happy to quote you. But it's not my idea, but I think it really hits home with me. And it's simply that our conditions often give us state experiences. And then we can't sustain them because we haven't trained ourselves into that trait. So for example, you might be on a walk and it's beautiful weather and your scenery is beautiful. It's fall in Minnesota and you feel so clear-minded and you feel so energized, and then you go home and you feel like life is mundane and everything's confusing, right? That happens to lots of people on vacation. You know, you feel free and engaged on vacation, you guys. You know what I mean? And then suddenly you go home and you feel exhausted and depleted, okay? So what's happening there is that your conditions, your circumstances are giving you a temporary state experience. Usually in this case, it's higher than you are used to, but you haven't practiced yourself into being that sort of person to a point where someone would label that as a trait in you. So if you felt like super chill on vacation, but nobody in real life labels you as chill, that's because your conditions were making it easy for you to be chill, but you haven't practiced the traits of being chill. Does that make sense? So in science, they call this the happiness set point. They call a trait your happiness set point, okay? So they did a study. And they studied 2 groups of people who won the lottery and people who had gotten into an accident and became paraplegic. So 2 very different drastic experiences. So what I'm drawing here is like a continuum of well-being, we'll call it. So if you feel really crappy, you'd be at a 0. We'll just give it 100. Okay. Now your trait experience, or your trait is your set point. So let's say on average you feel about 37. That's your happiness set point. Okay. So what was discovered in this study is that both the lottery winners and the people who had accidents and became paraplegic had drastic changes in their mood for a short period of time. And by short period of time, I think it was like 9 to 12 months. So kind of a long period of time, but when you consider how drastically their life changed, it wasn't as long as was expected. So put another way, they had a state experience, a temporary experience, either going up or down. So the paraplegics went down, but eventually came back up to their happiness set point. The lottery winners went up, but eventually came back down to their happiness set point. So here we have, I'm going to just label this so we know what it is. This is your happiness set point, your trait. The blue is your state experience, temporary experience. And these blue arrows are what cause the state experience are your changes in conditions. So again, the people who went up won the lottery, people who went down had an accident. So what was concluded from the study, as you can see from this diagram, is that changes in conditions can't change your set point. So just take a breath on that. In a society that values action, tangible action, that values results and rat races, we're coming to realize, even scientifically, that that isn't the backbone for any transformation or feeling of happiness, success, or joy. These people had big life changes. If you win $1 million+, that changes your life experience. If you lose the ability to use your legs for the rest of your life, that changes your life experience. But what they came to realize was it wasn't as big of a deal as they thought. So then the question becomes, what actually moves this, right? So instead of it being a temporary experience, what changes it into an actual set point, a trait? What is this arrow? And what they found is that this arrow is simply practicing different actions and perspectives. This arrow is what you practice. So another way of putting it, someone who has a happiness set point of 37 practices something different than someone who has a happiness set point of 57 or 38 or 99. These set points embody different practices. And by practices, again, not only just what you do, but how you think, your perspectives and your actions. So let's go back to this guy. So if a change in circumstances can only give you temporary relief or temporary change, then it's only logical that a change in conditions would go here. So you're having a mood. What we often think is, I need to change something to make my mood better. But what we're seeing now, it's a Band-Aid. It might make a temporary impact, but again, it's not addressing the true imbalance and the true thing that will bring you to balance. And what did they scientifically prove would address that? It's going to be increasing your trait. So this is like a state experience, a mood. This is increasing your trait or increasing your happiness set point. So the imbalance is our set point is too low, and we're feeling it. So we try to change the conditions, but it doesn't do anything long term. What is going to change our set point? Our practices. Take a breath on that. I think the set point or the trait, however you want to label this, that conversation is really what gives validity to this quote, no matter where you go, there you are. So you change your job, but you have a similar problem. You change your house, but you know, different faces, different locations, but you bring your traits with you, good and bad. You tried to make a change, but unfortunately it was on this vicious cycle, and instead of having a conversation with your mood about what was really going on, the true imbalance, this becomes the vicious cycle that you stay stuck in. The good news is no matter where you go, there you are. So here we are again. We have the power to make some pretty impressive changes in our life. Thoughts on that before I move forward?
Well, how does that apply then to not exercising or not eating healthy food? Like,
say a little more.
well, I was trying to think, like, how do I apply this to, so, like, I guess I was trying to, like, meld the two concepts and apply them to how I, like, to not exercising.
Not exercising consistently. Mm-hmm. I would say more clarity is going to come.
Okay.
I think it's just you're feeling into what's next.
Okay.
Does that feel okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just don't know what's coming. I mean, I don't know what's, I don't know what's not there. Do you know what I mean? So
I do.
I'm like, how do I figure that out?
Yeah. I would say if it resonates, just really identify what resonates, because again, the more we can label function and dysfunction, the more we're going to be able to spot it out as the conversation continues. Does that feel okay to you? Mm-hmm. Anything else? So, Tal Ben-Shahar, he's one of my favorite people to quote, as you've probably already seen. He's the one who said happiness is not the peak of the mountain, so on and so forth. In his book, Happier, he talks about how a really unhelpful question to ask yourself is, am I happy? But a really helpful question to ask yourself is, how could I be happier? So the title of his book isn't Happy, the title of his book is Happier. And so I really, that came to mind when this concept came to mind, because someone who is here and wants a better, let me see if I can say this better. Well, basically, when you're saying, how can I be happier, you're bringing your mind to a practice instead of trying to identify a state. Am I happy? I don't know. It's just a weird question, right? Like, you're never going to get a great answer because you'll always question it. But how can I become happier? Suddenly, we're focusing on practices that we have control over instead of just identifying something that feels out of our control. That is actually a message, not something that we have direct control over. Okay. So I want to end with a conversation here about not only practices, but this idea of process or a continual evolution. And one thing I really want to make clear, gotta find my way here, I need a map for these, is that this is not about getting here and staying here. If anyone could do that, I mean, that would be amazing. Everybody is doing different dances of this, okay? What this is about is practicing this more and more. By practicing this more and more, that doesn't mean you don't drop occasionally or a lot sometimes. Just because this might become a trait for you doesn't mean that you don't have experiences where you are practicing this again or where conditions pull you into a worse state. But what we're wanting is to make this our set point, to make this our trait instead of having these things be our traits. Okay? But to do that, we're going to keep doing this dance. We're going to keep, quote unquote, failing. And here he comes again, guys. Tal Ben-Shahar. He says, one of my mantras that I repeat over and over again to myself, to my students is to learn to fail or to fail to learn. One of the things that I tell my students about halfway through the class, when it's too late to drop the class, and they've already gotten to know me a little bit better, I tell them that I wish them that they fail more. I think maybe I have a typo there. And I truly, sincerely mean it, because it's only through failure that we can learn. No, it's not true. It's through failure that we can enjoy deep learning. It's through failure that we become more resilient and stronger. And if you look at the life of any successful person, they've always had major as well as minor failures. And I want to show you a quick video here. It's of one of my husband Phil's favorite coaches. He coaches football, PJ Fleck. He just came to the Gophers. And he's going to say something really great that I want to make a point of. But another thing he said once that really caught my attention was the reporter was asking about a certain quarterback and was he making too many mistakes. And he said something along the lines of, no, he hasn't failed enough yet. And I thought, man, this guy is brilliant. So he was actually advocating for this kid to fail more so that he could become the quarterback that he wanted him to be, that he knew he could be. And I thought, man, what a cool perspective. And you're going to see this perspective play out in another thing he has to say here.
They got to know what it's like to become the guy and what the responsibilities of that guy are. And they're learning that.
You built some programs from their infancy and build them up. How does this feel comparatively to maybe some of them?
Very similar. That's why I took the job. I think, as I got asked a question earlier today about expectations and, how do you manage, I think a lot of you asked me, how do you manage the expectations? And my question back to you was, well, we were picked 11th out of 14 in the Big Ten. And, after whatever season it was, you picked 11th out of 14. I think that just shows you what the expectations from people that even before I got here, what they saw. I've always taken over programs that I feel like I can just create my culture, create our culture, create something from the ground up. Again, this was not an extension of something else. It was to embrace our past, right, of the traditions we have, to create our future down the road. But right now, we have to be able to work through those to be able to connect the dots. And sometimes when you have to connect the dots, they don't connect in a straight line. I drew this, I always, and I'm going to do this again. I can't believe I'm going to do this. But I think everybody understands this. And I drew this at Western Michigan. But I think it's a great time for everybody to see this. I'm not an artist. But this is what everybody thinks success is, right? This is success. You start here, we hire the guy, there he goes. Right? And we're going to win. And we're just going to keep winning because we had change. That's not realistic. I did this at Western Michigan too, but I think it's a great time to be able to do this. This is what success actually looks like. Right? And when you change culture, you change everything. Offense, defense, special teams, coaches, logistics, operations, marketing, branding. Everything changes when you make a drastic change. And we made a drastic change. Right, wrong, or indifferent. Agreed, disagree. We made a change. And this is even for young people. 3 coaches in 3 years. Right? 6 coaches in 11 years. And then there's going to be this little spike, right? And then you're going to dip again. And this is called change again. This is called uncomfortableness. And then it's just going to continue to go. But there's going to be lots of peaks. There's going to be lots of valleys. There's going to be good times. There's going to be bad times. There's going to be doubt. There's going to be criticism. I hear everybody. I get it. I mean, nobody likes to lose. When we haven't won a championship in 50 years, everybody wants it to be this year. And I'm with you. But I've studied a lot of people. I've done this my entire life, all the way from high school, where we hadn't won a state championship my entire in the high school's existence. My junior and senior year, we win both, back-to-back, 14-0, 14-0. Then I go to a school that has a 27-game losing streak. We weren't very good, so they picked me to be their wideout. That's how bad we were. And I went there, and we were one of the worst teams in the country, and we flipped it, and we went 10-2 our senior year, and beat Alabama at Bama, and beat Maryland, and beat Iowa State. And if you continue to go through all that, I went to the San Francisco 49ers, who weren't very good at the time. Ohio State was one that was pretty good. There wasn't much you had to really do there in terms of learn how to rebuild it. But then we went to Rutgers. I watched Greg Schiano be able to rebuild that. And then I got a chance to rebuild my own program. Same thing. Again, reminding all of you to connect the dots that they hadn't won an outright championship in '66 and '88. Same type of deal. And went 1-11. And had all the criticism, had all the doubt, and was really my own best friend. Was kind of by yourself for a long time, and you're the only one rowing the boat at times. But this is what it's for. And then 2, 3, 4 years down the road, everybody's going to look back at this and say, "That's what he's talking about. That's what it. Okay, now row the boat's cool." But again, it just takes a while to get there. And we've had a lot of challenges. We've had a lot of adversity. But so has everybody. We've lost some really close games. And that's when everybody says, what was your definition of success? Do you have amount of wins that you'd sit there and say, well, was a positive year? I don't. If we would have just had one more drive or one more possession in 3 games, then you flip that, or 7-3 or whatever, 7-2 or 6-3, are we still sitting there saying that? Well, I look at how hard do our players play? How well is the culture being laid? What are we doing with the circumstances that are thrown our way? How are we responding in practices? How is the culture being built on and off the field? What are our players doing to change the narrative? So again, that's a long answer to your question, but this is something that every one of these coaches are here. The reason why they're here, Ed Warner was at Kansas. 1-11, bang. I think they went close to undefeated. Right? Every one
So
of
I
our
love-
coaches have been through some type of diversity.
There's so many things he said there. Like, he talked about changing the narrative, about it being about the culture more than about the wins, which is basically what we're doing. You're basically creating a new culture for yourself, is what's happening, okay? And so it can feel out of control. I'll show you exactly what it can feel like. It can feel like that, right? But I love the quote, "Be like the fox who makes more tracks than necessary, some in the wrong direction. Practice resurrection." So when you look at that, going back to one of the first things I said with this lesson, life lived beautifully is more of an art than a science, right? The right side is an art. The left side is not only a myth, but also looks more like a science. This is an evolving conversation. This is a practice. This is a process. This is laying a new culture for yourself. And the cool thing is, as we lay a new culture for ourselves, we then lay a new culture for our families. And as we lay a new culture for our families, we lay a new culture for our communities. And as we do that, the ripple spreads. So the discomfort, the quote-unquote failure, which isn't failure, by the way. What it'll be is just more sensitivity to this, which is good. It's all worth it. And I'm going to end with 2 quotes that I love. One from Joshua Rosenthal, "Life is a long time." It's a long time to practice this. And it's a long time to see what could come of this. And you have time to figure it out. This is not about being a completely different person tomorrow or when you walk out this door. Life is a long time. And finally, Tony Robbins says, "Most people overestimate what they can accomplish in a year and vastly underestimate what they can achieve in a decade." Take a breath, ladies.
Let's chat.
I know, right? Because it's
Can I hear 30 minutes?
It's right.
Okay. So you're tired, I know.
It's like bedtime.
I was gonna say.
Netflix time.
Say exactly.
We talked about a lot of stuff.
I was gonna say, who's gonna go home and do an Annalisa video tonight?
Okay, so just to recap, we started with you're not the problem. So it's not, if tools and knowledge on its own aren't working for you, that's not because you're the issue. Transformation is possible. The language of life, well, it's not up there, but discomfort being a message versus the problem. There's always and only one real problem. Rich conversations, and then process and practice. So I would just be curious to know just your top, just like what you're thinking about right now. It doesn't have to be long, just kind of, it can be if it needs to be, but just what is sticking at the top of your list after all this? After 4 hours of me.
I think I have figured out why you can't give us the answer.
Oh yeah?
Although we still want you to give us the answer. I think I figured out why.
Tell me.
I believe that I have to practice my own inspired to raise my set point. And my inspired is different than her inspired.
Danita. Well said.
Yes.
But we still want you to do it.
Oh, I love that insight.
Well, and I was just sharing that, you know, even if you knew me really well and you kind of know me pretty well, you can make suggestions, but you don't truly know.
Right.
Yeah.
And it could change.
Right. Yeah, because it's a conversation, and we have to keep having that conversation with ourselves, and it
Yeah.
evolves.
Thank you, Danita.
I was typing
So-
away and then I went, no, draw. And so then that's how I put it together, right next to each other. So if that's ever helpful.
Interesting.
Now I'm feeling lucky.
Oh.
There you go.
Scratch
Saving that for Sunday. All right.
Love it. Thank you. That was a good one. Anybody else? Well, actually, just let's quick go around.
Okay.
Laura?
So what was this supposed to?
Just top. What's top of mind
Oh, it's
right
hap-
now?
I think right now it's still in my brain. It's just the whole like the discomfort is the messenger, and it's not the problem. And I think that that's really hard for me because we don't want to be discomfort. But it was enlightening because it's like pay attention to that. Don't run away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. That's where I'm at.
Well said.
Okay.
Thank you. Christina?
What's really been on my mind is that studies have shown over and over, like the most successful CEOs are those who carve out time for themselves for exercise. And it's like, why is that okay? Because clearly they don't have enough obligations to keep them busy. And it is like, I think it's recognizing that that's part of what is their inspiration is like, I have to be able to be healthy to be able to keep going. I can't be off because I'm sick or because I'm run down or because I'm sleepy or whatever. So taking care of themselves becomes a priority for them, which is part of their freedom and engagement.
I love this point. So basically what you're saying is before you thought it was just about the act of exercising, where now you're realizing it must be that that's a practice for them that gets them into free and engaged. And that's why it has such a great, that's why it has an ROI for them.
Yeah.
Well said. Cool. Christy?
I agree with Laura, but also I really liked the part where you were saying that the question, am I happy, is just, to me, it's almost unanswerable because there's so many components to it. And as you said, you may feel like you're here, but there's always room for happier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good title of a book, right? There we go. Go tell Ben.
You can have that one.
It's already taken. Thanks for sharing. You already had your awesome one. Carrie?
Oh, I was pretty sure before I got here that conditions were going to change my
and that was always going to come with time. You know, like when my kids are a little bigger, when we're full-time farming, when whatever, and I know that, but yeah, it's about mindset and practice. I mean, it makes sense that that's not gonna make it better.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, unless I can have the practices that are gonna change my happiness to the point that you've been telling this for a while, that I need to enjoy the journey. And I just reinforce that.
Mm-hmm. It's weird because when we really get it that the conditions don't do it, like like you're saying, an aha moment, it's like this mix of horror plus empowerment.
Right.
You're like, shit. It really
Yeah.
is, because it just is it's a mind-boggling kind of, and you don't know. Well, it's kind of like you hope you didn't waste your time. A little bit of that. I don't know if you're feeling that, but then also how can I trust that not placing my emphasis on conditions will actually give me an ROI in mood and conditions? You know what I mean?
Right.
And how, if I don't focus on conditions, will everything fall apart in my life?
Mm-hmm.
It's all these weird questions that
Right.
start to stir.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Em?
I guess what's coming up for me right now is that I think it's funny or interesting that I can practice some of this stuff in some areas of my life. Like my work life now that I left corporate and, self-employed and doing all of that and coaching and working on careers, like that I teach this stuff like in the career space. Like I can't tell you how many sources are similar or concepts. Like I teach the growth and fixed mindset, but then it's like I can't seem to apply it to myself with the health stuff.
Yeah.
So that's really fascinating to me, that it's just so interesting to me that for some reason it's like I don't know what it is.
Probably just more ingrained in sledding hills or sledding paths. That's it. So I would say, instead of saying like I just can't seem to, maybe just like loosen it up and just say, in the past it was hard to, but now I'm making new sledding paths.
Yeah.
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 Anything else?
So I'm curious to know, and you tell me if I'm missing the whole point, but sorry, I'm gonna use Carrie as an example. Is changing the mindset also changing the mindset towards what exercise is? Because I think about, I think everybody here said they have kids or younger kids at home, and I think about working on a farm, and it's like we're getting a lot of physical activity right there. So from my perspective, she's already exercising. and so it's like I've done, I have exercise videos that I really like to do because they don't hurt me. But then other people look at them and say, well, that's not going to do anything for you. You're not going to lose any weight that way. You're not going to blah, blah, blah. And so it becomes, okay, so I've learned that I need to feel better, and part of what helps me feel better is taking care of myself and getting to what is inspiring for me. But to Danita's point, if what's inspiring for me is doing some Leslie Sansone walk it out, and what is inspiring for you is doing insanity, then is the fact that for each of us, that's our version of inspiration. Is that good enough? Or is that not good enough because it's not what the doctors say you should do, or what the society says you should do, or I don't know.
You answered your own question.
It's just,
it's good enough.
Okay.
Yeah. But until you can have that conversation with yourself, you might not know it.
Yeah.
Because you can see, I can tell you that, but until you know it,
Right.
Yeah.
it doesn't change anything.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. Like, do you, like, you work at a farm, and I've helped you at the farm, and I think it's very physical. But, like, because you do it every day, do you feel like it's exercise? Or in your brain, like, your culture, in your mind, does that count for you? You know what I mean? Like, where, you know, does it count? You know, like, do you still feel guilty that you didn't exercise today when really you put on however many steps, you know, whatever, and you're, you know, pitchfork and stuff? And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, I guess
sorry, that's kind of a
no,
direct
but,
personal
like,
question.
If I don't feel like hurting at the end of the day, I'm like, oh, it's not bad. You know,
Oh,
it's-
didn't do
yeah,
enough.
there's
You have all
days-
these different.
Yeah,
Because
like
there
how
are
many
days that are really
foolishness.
hard though, where it's like, whoa, I really go.
You did a lot.
But see, and I
yeah.
say that towards all of you, like as mothers, because like I said, I don't have a biological kid in my house. And it's like whenever I've had the chance to babysit, for example, I'm like, I have to carry how much crap, and I can't, like, this thing is heavy, and this child is heavy, and I had to figure out how to balance these bags and this car seat, and, you know, and I'm like, oh my God, moms are like Supergirl. Like, what is that? And to me, I'm like, okay, you just like gave baths and cooked dinner and got everybody in the car and to school, and I'm like, and you don't feel like you got anything done today?
Yeah.
I know. But see, like if you when you see
Yeah.
it through their perspective
Yeah.
versus when you are hard on yourself about what is exercise.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so it
It's
really
just
is
like your
giving
point, Emily.
yourself the permission that you're giving others.
Yeah.
You know, that I can decide what it means to me. I mean, here's what exercise comes down to. The only 3 components: cardio, strength, stretching.
Yeah.
If you do those 3 main components, your body's going to be healthy. Cardio is just getting your heart rate up. It doesn't have to be massive. It can be massive, but it's really simple. That's it.
Right.
Are you know, giving your muscles some resistance sometimes? Are you lengthening them? Are you getting your heart rate up?
Right.
So you can do any forms of that. That can be a million different ways, but it's
Right.
never going to feel like enough if we don't give ourselves permission to define it as we want it to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, loves, it's time for you all to go drink tea or wine or beer and watch Netflix.
I was like, yeah, Netflix calling.
Module 2 is complete, and you are well on your way to creating a more positive culture for yourself and for your family and for your community at large. If you haven't already, take a second to jot down your top insights and takeaways. You may also be interested in checking out the PDFs that correspond with the content from this module. These PDFs contain things like quotes and lists of books and other resources I referenced throughout the past 3 videos. When you're ready, I look forward to seeing you in the next video, Module 3, Lesson 1, where we'll be talking about engagement. We'll identify the 9 big rocks of life, the 9 things that are absolutely worth your engagement, meaning worth investing your time or money in. See you over there, Module 3, Lesson 1.